going live. Not many people here yet, though. Hello, everyone. And away we go.
This is the prisoner as you know him. This is the prisoner as he appears in Do Not Forsake Me, O My Darling. No one will believe that within this body lives the mind and personality of another man. The man you know as the prisoner.
Who else could have given you that message?
Nobody.
Couldn't you say? Nobody but you? We have met before, but you couldn't possibly remember me because the first time we met, I looked like this.
The prisoner is the same, only his body is different in the next dramatic adventure of The Prisoner on this channel.
Well, it's fantastic to have you. This is our last regular episode before the two-part shattering finale of The Prisoner. So this would be episode 15. Yeah. Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. And by the way, I just want to give a shout out, as you pointed out, our great graphic artist for this show, Jason Spriggs, who does all of these overlays. Even you said this might be your favorite of all of the overlays.
I do. It's incredible, this one. It's absolutely amazing.
I love at the top of the frame how he's got both faces up there, and Jason,
it's so well thought out. You see, he's got Seltzman in the middle at the end. Then you've got the split. Because the split personality, then you've got the fiance, it's perfect.
Jason is a very talented guy all the way around. I realize that I'm wearing, he's this thing, he collects vintage ray guns, like ray guns made out of tin from the past, and he is Mr. Ray Gun. I just realized I'm wearing, this is one of his shirts. I didn't even mean for it to be that way. I like his shirts that he makes too. And he actually won our contest for the first Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival poster contest.
Wow.
He did a very Python-esque design. Now, I told you that I received, on my own channel, I get a lot of viewer letters. I read them and share them on my channel. I received a letter. It's a fantastic letter that was sent to us. And I would like to share it if that's okay with you, because I think it's very... Okay, this comes from Kevin Ainsworth, and he says, Dear Robert and Az, I've been watching and enjoying your show on The Prisoner since the very first one. I first watched The Prisoner when Channel 4 in England showed it in 1983 and promptly fell in love with it. Your 6 of 1 show is one of the highlights of my week. I was very disappointed then when neither of you could find anything good to say about the girl who was death. I was born in I was born in 1960, and having grown up watching 60s television, I've always loved and enjoyed The Girl Who Was Death. After watching your review of it on 6 of 1, I went back to rewatch The Girl Who Was Death, and I enjoyed it just as much. If anything, I gained more insights this time than in previous viewings. I guess you have both got me into thinking deeply about the prisoner mode. I wonder if many of the things which were familiar to 100% of the audience watching in the 60s, and the majority of us watching in 1983, have been lost to subsequent generations. To me, the things you were bored with and moaning about are key elements in understanding not only this episode of The Prisoner, but the series as a whole. In seemingly approaching this episode as being very poor, but something you had to watch and endure, I think you also missed out on seeing something massively relevant to today. I believe McGoohan does provide an explanation as to why his character resigned in the episode. He always wanted to treat his audience with respect and make them think about things rather than tell them, and I think he succeeds here. The answer is, as one of your super chatters said, mentioned in plain sight. Not only that, but The Girl Who Was Death is also, in my opinion, key to signposting and understanding for the finale of The Prisoner. Most people think that the finale consists of the final 2 episodes, but I have always maintained that it is a trilogy, with many people overlooking this first part of it. I have loved your running order for The Prisoner, and I think it makes a great deal of sense. But I have to disagree with you showing The Girl Who Was Death as fourth from last. It needs to be third from last and the first part of the finale trilogy. Having watched The Girl Who Was Death, I also watched Once Upon a Time and Fallout, and am more convinced of this than ever. The Girl Who Was Death, seen as the first part of a trilogy, makes far more sense than watching it as a standalone episode. It also gives insights into the final 2 episodes. Originally, The Girl Who Was Death was written as a 2-part story that they could edit together to make a theatrical release. This was big in the 60s, and various TV shows did it. The Saint, for example, released 2-part The Fiction Makers and the 2-part Vendetta for The Saint theatrically as 2 films. The 2 color episodes of Danger Man Kuroshi and Shinda Shima were edited together as Kuroshi. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. did a similar thing. Unfortunately, Lou Grade said no to the extra budget to film this story over 2 episodes, so it had to be edited down to 1 episode. Had he said yes, then The Girl Who Was Death would have been The Prisoner feature film. To dismiss it as being a very poor episode of The Prisoner does The Girl Who Was Death a great disservice, as it meant...
I gotta he's wrong.
Yeah?
You're wrong. Lou Grade wanted 30-something episodes of The Prisoner. He wanted like 33 episodes, and McGoohan said, I can't do 33 episodes. And so they were back and forth, and he managed, because McGoohan only wanted to do 7 originally.
Right.
Back and forth, and they agreed on 17, which meant they actually had to go off and get other scripts. Yeah, there were some scripts that were turned down, but they had to knock up some stories. This one being one of them because of what happened, which we'll go into. So there's something wrong there, because that doesn't add up.
Well, okay, let me,
because they would have budgeted for 33 episodes of the series.
Let's see. Okay. Why do I think it's so important? McGoohan wrote and filmed Degree Absolute with Leo McKern many months before he started the finale. He always intended it to be the penultimate episode. He then wrote Fallout during production and the production of The Girl Who Was Death. He went straight from filming The Girl Who Was Death into filming Fallout with a little overlap. Knowing what he had already written and filmed with Degree Absolute, he fashioned Fallout to follow on from that episode. He also fashioned The Girl Who Was Death to immediately precede Degree Absolute and lead into it. Thematically and symbolically, those 3 episodes all flow into each other. The resolution and punchline to The Girl Who Was Death is that number 6 is sitting in a child's nursery, telling the children what number 2 assumes to be a fairy story. Number 2 is frustrated and assumes that number 6 has given nothing away. But he is wrong, because number 6 has given a possible explanation of his resignation, and one which could only be explained in the context of a fairy tale. It is something which we, the audience, can spot if we look at the clues both here and in some dialogue in Degree Absolute. I laughed and cheered out loud when number 6 said, "Good night, children," everywhere, as it is something anybody who grew up in the 60s or before would recognize. 100% of the audience in 1968 would have understood the significance of that statement. Children of the 50s and 60s had very limited entertainment. There was Children's Hour on the radio and later the television. One of the most famous of radio children's presenters was Uncle Mac, who worked on the children's show from 1931 to 1965, and he very famously finished each one with, "Good night, children," everywhere. So to me, number 6 saying "Good night, children," then turning the look into the camera directly at number 2 before finishing with "everywhere" was a fantastic put-down and closing line. The episode shows him at his peak. He is at home in the children's nursery with children while mocking the authorities. He is on top and he knows it. Perhaps he has too much hubris because the authorities are stunned into action with Degree Absolute. He mocks the authorities in the village as being children at the end of The Girl Who Was Death, which stings them into the ultimate response. At the start of the next story, they regress number 6 into being a child himself, and the child's nursery, where he is relaxed and at his most confident at the end of The Girl Who Was Death, is transformed into a nightmare nursery designed to break him in Degree Absolute. More significantly, the fairy tale he tells in The Girl Who Was Death prompts a change to the title of the much earlier Degree Absolute. What does every fairy tale, even a nightmare one designed by the village, begin with? Once upon a time. Why do I think The Girl Who Was Death provides an answer to why he resigned? In an interview with the British Radio 1 in 1990, McGoohan said, "Everybody is a prisoner of something. You escape when you are released, I suppose, by death. It's the final release." There is a cracking piece of dialogue in The Girl Who Was Death where she is talking to him over the loudspeakers and says that he is a born survivor while she is a born killer. Her name is Death. He can call her Death. This makes a great deal of sense. As a secret agent, there was a reason he was known as Danger Man. He lived dangerously, time after time after time, and one mistake meant death. He had to watch out for it and do his best to avoid it. When he leaves Potter after the shoe shine, Death is standing in the shop window watching him. She stalks him and tries to kill him, but he refuses to die like others have done. More significantly, he then goes stalking her. You both mentioned how silent he was after the pub scene, but to me that shows how serious the situation was. He had no time for quips, as he had to be alert at all times to avoid sudden death. She could taunt him, but he had to keep his wits about him, with no time to think of witty retorts. His situation becomes more and more serious as she uses bigger weapons and deadlier traps. It is interesting that he uses the character of Potter from the final 2 episodes of Danger Man. They were the only 2 shot in color and were edited together to make a theatrical release. They also contained a secret organization and a secret base, with the mastermind seated behind the same gun used in The Girl Who Was Death. The interesting thing about these 2 color episodes of Danger Man is that they were filmed in 1966, but not shown on television until 1968, when they were broadcast during a break in The Prisoner leading up to the finale. Not only would this have blurred any distinction between Number 6 and John Drake, but Kuroshi and Shindashima would have been very fresh in the audience's mind when they watched The Girl Who Was Death. McGoohan had to make it very different in style while trying to remain the same for the secret agent's perils. Was Number 6 giving an amalgamation of various events in his life as an agent, including the last one in Kuroshi and Shindashima? There are things in both of these which turn up in The Girl Whose Death in a different guise. What, therefore, is this fairy tale telling us about that life? In fiction, the hero always wins, whereas in reality, that's not always the case. In fiction, there's always a way out of any trap for the hero, whereas in reality, that isn't the case. Number 6 survives a series of deadly traps set by Death, but it is always touch and go. What if he had been dangling above the electrified spikes, but there was no handy box to pull down and stand on? What if he had been trapped in a sealed room with an exploding cyanide candle, but no bellows? What if he had been trapped on a bulldozer with no convenient manhole to escape through? He is chasing her in his car, and she plays with his head, but still, he doggedly pursues her. Straight fiction gives an illusion of reality to entertain us, whereas a fairy tale can portray far more truth about that reality coded in allegory. The Prisoner portrayed truth on so many levels and so many subjects. In fiction, the hero has to come out with witty quips in moments of danger because the character is written to entertain the audience. In reality, there are no witty clips, as death can come instantly. The fact that, after the pub scene, Number 6 stops making any quips and pretty much stops talking is very telling. There is a reason McGoohan made this choice. He was not interested in entertaining his audience at this point. He was showing the reality of a potential sudden death for his character within the context of an allegorical fairy tale. It is interesting how Number 6 portrays Death as a beautiful and attractive but deadly woman. She loves him, but that will not stop her from killing him. Which raises the question, after many years in the field of avoiding death for himself while seeing others die, had he suddenly found himself attracted to death? Although his instincts to survive kept kicking in, he did find himself actually pursuing death on his missions? Was he worried that one day he would succeed in his pursuit and his instincts would no longer be enough to save him? In the fairy story, he turns death's own weapon against her and her crew. She was, as we say in England, hoist by her own petard. He could not keep cheating death forever as a secret agent. In Once Upon a Time, Number 6 joins the company until death do us part, and that is said more than once in the episode. When he finally gives Number 2 an answer to why he resigned, he said just one word: peace. It means nothing in isolation, but given the context of The Girl Who Was Death, it makes a lot of sense. Had he not resigned, then the only way out would have been until death do us part. and he was finding death attractive and actually pursuing it. Resignation stopped his fascination and attraction to death and gave him peace. I'm not saying this is the definitive reason he resigned, but it is a reason, and in these 3 episodes, if we care to look. There's another reason why I think The Girl Who Was Death is an important part of the trilogy finale. From the moment number 6 was taken to the village in Arrival, and one of the 2 major questions asked at the start of each episode was, who is number 1? The James Bond series had teased a mysterious number 1 ruling specter in the first 4 films. He ruled with a rod of iron, and his underlings were petrified of him. From his hand seen stroking his white cat to his silky smooth voice, we could build up an impressive picture of this charismatic leader. He was finally revealed in the 5th film You Only Live Twice in 1967 to be the ex-Nazi Blofeld, as played by Donald Pleasance, who lived in a secret base under a volcano, which was very similar to the villain and scenario in the final Danger Man episode, Shindashima, filmed before You Only Live Twice, but shown afterwards. This would have still been fresh in the television audience watching The Prisoner a year later in '68. How could McGoohan match or top that on a television budget? Would the revelation of an individual have been measured against Blofeld? Would it have been a massive anticlimax to the watching public? James Bond had 3 different Blofelds in 3 different films without quite getting it right. The Prisoner would only have 1 chance to get such a revelation right. This is why I think The Girl Who Was Death is an important first part of a final trilogy. There was a massive expectation leading up to it that there would be a Blofeld-type number 1 in the finale, and McGoohan uses The Girl Who Was Death to give them such a character, with a secret organization and a dastardly plan to blow up London. In this episode, he is, in effect, telling the audience, you have had your criminal mastermind being defeated by number 6, and it is a fairy story. Now let me tell you my true ending. You said during your show that originally the villain and his men were going to be dressed as Nazis, but it was changed. One reason was that McGoohan had seen Kenneth Griffin performing as Napoleon on stage, but I suspect that became a handy thing to change for other reasons. Ex-Nazis were a cliche at this point in the 60s. Blofeld had been revealed as one the year before. There was also a
comeback in the 2020s.
There was also a very popular children's television action-adventure series called Freewheelers, where the recurring villain for the first 3 series, starting in '68, was the ex-SS officer Karl von Gelb. In one story, the heroes had to stop him from launching a Polaris missile to destroy London. I still have child memories of Von Gelb, so he was a very interesting villain, and they obviously got the casting right. My final memory of him was when he was blown up by his own missile and never returned again, much to my disappointment as a child. So I suspect McGoohan made the changes to stop people from spotting similarities or making comparisons to these other Nazi villains. Of course, it also brings some interesting questions about small men with Napoleon complexes wanting to compensate by ruling or destroying the world, and McGoohan was clever enough to include them because of the change. I mentioned earlier that I think you have missed seeing something very relevant to today, which, knowing your interests, did surprise me. This episode comments on the trivialization of death in modern fiction and computer games. A character dies but simply comes back to restart or continue the game.
There weren't computer games in those times.
That's true. Those playing the game no longer see death as a real thing with consequences as they indulge in shoot-'em-ups. At the start of The Girl Who Was Death, the spy originally on the case on level 1 playing cricket. He does not survive that level, but his character returns as number 6, steps in but disguised as the original spy. He survives level 1 and then moves on to level 2 in the pub. He survives that and moves on to the next level at the fairground. Having survived that, he moves on to the next level where he's chasing death in a car. He then arrives at the next level where the traps become increasingly dangerous and harder to survive. By this time, he is no longer masquerading as another character, but has to face it as himself because the peril is so bad. As with each level, there's an...
That's not right. you can't say that. You can't say that going into a room with electrified floor is an escalation of being poisoned to death. They were just various attempts attempting to kill number 6, and we both thought they became very one-note, very boring, because essentially they did, because you can't differentiate the severity between being poisoned and being electrified. Who determines which is worse? Which is, if there was an escalation, and we could see an escalation, which would have to be through toying to being serious, then it would be there to show. I think there are some incredible leaps that are being trying to be made here, which don't, in my personal opinion, work. But go on, finish.
I'm almost done. It ends with Death thinking she is one and that number 6 has not survived the most dangerous level. Yet he has, and so moves on to the final level and the end game where he manages to outwit his opponents using tools provided on that level. I come back again to the relevance of McGoohan not speaking much after the pub level. He's pointing out that although this is a fairy tale or modern-day computer game, he is a real person in it, and death is very relevant and final to him. He will not come back as another character if he fails. Even the original spy did not come back, as it was just number 6 doing a facsimile impersonation. In a computer game, once a character dies, that original character does not return, but a facsimile recreation of that character, and this is not true of real life. By playing his scenes totally seriously and not for our entertainment, McGoohan is making a very relevant point about the difference between fiction and real life. Drama works in fiction if we genuinely care for the character and think there is real danger of change, and there is no greater change in fiction or reality than death. But that has become blurred in a modern society with its different types of fiction, comics, computer games, etc. Dead heroes return. Dead villains return. Dead first-person characters in games return, thus removing the thought that death is final and has consequences for the person playing that character in the game. McGoohan touches on the theme in The Girl Who Was Death, but comes back to it big time in Fallout. To sum up, I think The Girl Who Was Death contains a great deal of truth for today and gives us both a reason for number 6's resignation and a version of the expected finale showing a criminal mastermind with his uniformed organization and a nefarious plan in a secret base being outwitted and comprehensively beaten by the prisoner. In mocking that mastermind, McGoohan also mocked the expectations of the audience. He had a much better ending in mind. I hope these words, written in haste, help to inspire a reappraisal of The Girl Who Was Death, as I think you could both enjoy it and get far more from it than you previously did. I would suggest that you watch Kuroshi, Shindashima, The Girl Who Was Death, Once Upon a Time, and Fallout, one after the other, because that's what the audience in 1968 would have done, and this would give you the same perspective they had. Regards, Kevin Ainsworth, London, England. What do you think about that?
There's obviously a great deal of thought which has gone into that, and I really do appreciate and respect that. There are definitely some interesting points as regards to death and the potential trivialization of it and the sort of fairy tale element of it against realism. However, I do think there are some incredible leaps, especially with production. Especially with Kuroshi. Kuroshi was the first color Danger Man, which was two parts put together to make this feature film.
Yeah.
So that was only through production did it fall where it fell. In regards to Fallout, McGoohan didn't even know what he was doing with Fallout. He self-confessed. So to say it ties in with these. Even ties in with Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time. And The Girl Who Was Death, I would throw out the window immediately because even on filming, he didn't know where the fuck he was going with
right.
it. So, like we've joked time and time again, when it comes to Fallout, where do we even start with that one? To be perfectly honest with you, if McGoohan doesn't know, how on earth are we meant to make some sort of sense out of it? The Potter business, well, Potter's in this episode as well. It's a different Potter. So Potter actually came in Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. He didn't come in The Girl Who Was Death. And I'm pretty sure that this chap being called Potter is a homage to Danger Man Potter as well. Just as when they got the original Potter actor to appear in The Girl Who Was Death, they then thought, wouldn't it be funny if we called him Potter? So in regards to the Potter business, I think it was just coincidental and nothing more because of managing to land the actor again. Video games weren't around in 67, so we can't equate it to video games. We can equate, if you want to use it as an allegory for today, fine, you know? But that wouldn't have been the interpretation at that point, at that time at all. And potentially, did he give a reason for resigning? Very much open for debate. I don't know if there's a right or a wrong answer to that one. Did he give the reason in plain sight? I don't know. I think he was purposely spinning number 2 a yarn, hence why at the end he did use the almost insult, "Good night, children everywhere," because I think he was simply telling number 2, "I've just spun you a complete yarn, because I know you're listening in and I know the whole situation, what's going on. Don't try and fool me that easily." And using this as a retaliation for Once Upon a Time, I don't see that. I don't see the fragility of number 2 to a degree whether their ego gets the better of them. If an individual ego gets the better of a number 2, that's the downfall of the number 2, not the downfall of number 6. Leo McGoohan was always touted to come back in Once Upon a Time. That was always going to be on the cards from the inception of The Prisoner. So there was already a plan in place with Chimes of Big Ben having to be pushed to number 2 because of Leo McGoohan's return later on in the series, which of course put everything out of whack in terms of order, we thought, and hence why we've come up with our own order, which I personally think has been bloody amazing.
It really has.
Yeah, so there's, I can hear what you're trying to say in some occasions, but I think there are some monumental leaps. Pulling from history at the time doesn't necessarily mean that McGoohan did. One of the things that we do know is McGoohan was exceedingly isolated during this period in The Prisoner, in constructing these scripts, in having to come in and writing under a fake name for some of them, and so to pull on external sources so specific, I can't personally see it myself. Others might, but there's the beauty of The Prisoner, and the whole reason why we have this series is to discuss,
right?
And so coming out with these sort of letters and viewpoints, I find fantastic. We've stressed ourselves. People will have our own individual takes. We'll have our own individual ideas. It doesn't necessarily mean anyone's wrong per se. Whether we agree or disagree, it's open for interpretation, and this show's been open for interpretation. The next episodes are open for interpretation, and healthy discussion.
Well, that's. I think Mr. Ainsworth, I have to give it up for him, because obviously, even though he says it was written in haste, the fact that he took the time to write such a thoughtful letter and made some really interesting connections. What I've always found about how film is perceived, film or television or any stories, we do lose the context of the time in which they were written. Yes. And he makes some assertions, especially I'm a viewer in the United States. I would never know about a children's host and their sign-off. I would have to do some real deep dives into pop culture of Britain in the 60s to even get to that. So that's something that I, as a viewer in the United States, would never know. But it's very interesting to hear something like that, because like you've said, and like we've said around this, hearing people's interpretations of things is what makes this so much fun. And the fact that somebody has been watching our show and did such a deep dive makes me incredibly happy that we inspired somebody to share this theory. But their theory obviously is a theory that I could never I think some of it is really valuable, and I think The Girl Who Was Death actually was the episode broadcast right before Once Upon a Time and Fallout in the original order, and I think that there's a lot of relevance to that assertion, and I think that he's absolutely right in making the correlation between The Girl Who Was Death and Once Upon a Time. I think all of those things were absolutely, probably really spot on. And it never, honestly, it didn't occur to me until I was reading that letter, until I read it the first time. And I'm like, maybe he's absolutely correct, because in the context of all three, before, I didn't want to do this, but I didn't want to watch that episode again, but I'm going to do it. When I go watch Once Upon a Time again, I'm going to watch The Girl Who Was Death. I don't know if I can watch the Danger Man episodes, but I feel like I want to try that. It's just like when someone says, you have to watch the Star Wars prequels with the machete order, which is, you watch Star Wars, then Empire Strikes Back, then you go back and you watch Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and then watch Return of the Jedi. Because it gives you a more fulfilling story that in that machete order where you just dump the Phantom Menace.
I really like them better, John.
And but it's interesting. I mean, and I think that what I love about this is that art, again, the idea of a video game didn't exist in the 60s, but now we obviously have video games. So when he makes that assertion, it's suddenly the art that was created in a pre-video game era takes on a lot more relevance if you start listening or assuming it is video game like. I mean, they could never have known that at the time, but isn't it interesting 50 years later that because we have video games and our characters regenerate or reconstitute, that you can make that leap, that suddenly an element of a story that was told 50 years ago has extra added resonance today because we have something like video games that didn't exist.
I mean, we've discussed that throughout the series. I mean, we've made leaps. We talked about social media. Media,
absolutely.
So we talked about different aspects of modern culture that can easily fit. My inability to go along with some of this is his job was dangerous.
Yes.
So death was always stalking him in his job regardless. The story could have just been, regardless of who I was chasing, whoever the villain was, ultimately it was death. Because if I was to die, then it would be game over for whatever nefarious situation. So it could be as bland and basic as that, as regards to death. I find it very difficult to watch the episode. I don't think I'm going to go back and watch it.
Well, I think the real question is, you still have to be entertained, and the movie, the movie still has to work. That's one of the things that I find a lot nowadays, where especially when not to bash on Star Trek Discovery, we usually wait until the end of the episode to do that, but when I watch an episode of Star Trek Discovery, people are always trying to convince me of things that are in the episode. And I'm like, yes, but they're not being presented in a way that is obvious.
If you have to explain, then the show is failing.
The show's failing. Well, now, speaking of something I didn't think fails, this week's episode, Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, is an episode that, I have seen it. I remembered it. But I have to tell you, watching it now, I found it far more enjoyable and fun than I think I've ever felt that it was before.
This is a very good episode, written in very weird circumstances, and they don't get the casting of Six's replacement right at all with Nigel Stock, and it works.
Right. I liked him. I never liked him before. I liked him now.
Yeah, there was. I mean, I like Nigel Stock. He's a very good actor. Don't get me wrong. He's a very good actor indeed, and he's probably much more known as playing Holmes in Sherlock Holmes and Cushing and stuff. And yeah, he's got a great body of work behind him. I think what we all initially, because this is also put together really differently. At the beginning, we actually get an introduction before we get the credits.
A pre-title sequence.
Yeah, which is what we haven't had before. And, you know, apart from Arrival, which was all part of the episode at the time. So we actually get this little pre-credit sequence where they're, you know, talking about Seltzman. You see that they've got the images, which of course were returned. So that fits in. So that was set up for later on in the episode.
What's interesting, I feel like what I find interesting about that is this episode is not about number 6. Number 6 is a means to an end for them. They have a different desire, which is they have to find this scientist and they know number 6 was attached to him.
Yeah.
And I thought that the need that they had to put in this pre-title sequence, I found very interesting. And of course, they changed the music in the actual title sequence.
Yes. We get the regular stuff, and then when he hits the village, we get this beautiful, I think it's absolutely gorgeous piece of music when he looks out the window and sees the village, and then it's again a little bit of surrealism because he looks out the window, then he hears the helicopter. He's looking up. We see the helicopter, and the helicopter's arriving, of course, and bringing the colonel with him, who's going to be taking over the body, and so all flows together superbly, and this incredibly beautiful piece of very melancholy music, is playing along. And the reason, of course, in case you don't know, we've mentioned it many times, but in case you don't know, the reason why this episode was written the way it was written is because McGoohan had to go away. He had to go away and film My Station Zebra. And so they had to film an episode, and so they had very limited time with McGoohan, and they needed to replace him with another actor because that was what the episode was going to entail. So they had to come up with this idea, and this is what they came up with. It was very good, I thought.
Well, it's another 60s trope. Obviously, the final episode of Star Trek, the original series, ends with a mind-swapping episode where Kirk's mind is put into the body of a woman. Dr. Janice Lesser, turnabout intruder. And now I don't know, which probably came out. I mean, if this episode came out in 69, would it have been broadcast in
68 for the UK?
68, okay. So they hadn't seen the episode. They hadn't seen the Star Trek episode. But I always find it interesting that a lot of these, I mean, I'd love to go in and see how many body swapping or mind swapping episodes appeared over various, like was ever there a Mission Impossible episode like this? Because
Invasion of the Body Snatchers and all this kind of stuff is going on.
Absolutely. So this was something, definitely a trope of the time, but I do find I thought it was really well done. I mean, as much as the actor might have been miscast, I really enjoyed, like, once they explained what was happening, they really jumped right into it. Like, you suddenly they number 6 is pacing around his apartment, and then in the next scene he's being hauled off to number 2's.
A group of boys just coming and grabbing him and taking him away. I mean, we say miscast. There's a debate that it was perfectly cast because it was completely different to McGoohan.
Mm-hmm.
However, officially, they kind of think it was miscast as well.
Right. But I do. I mean, I did like his demeanor when he comes in. He's like, why have I been brought here? Like, he felt like he was good at his job, like he was a badass. And he's like, look, I don't know why I'm here. Why am I here? Why? And he was very officious, right down to business.
10 years older than McGoohan and 15 pounds overweight.
At least.
So in that regard, it's, when you've got, McGoohan, how tall's McGoohan? 6'2", probably. Very thin. Well, no, I say very thin, very lean guy. And then suddenly you've got this 5'10", 15 pounds overweight. I mean, I sit here. But I'm not a secret agent, so it's all right.
Right.
I'm not trying to prove myself. Don't worry, darling. It kind of looks physically miscast, but I don't know. As the kind of episode goes along, it kind of feels right in a way.
Right. That's how I felt about it too. At first, I'm like, wait, what? and then you get used to it. But then as it goes along, I liked seeing the actor portraying being number 6 in his mind. I like that a lot. Although I will say this, it did annoy me that they kept cutting to stock footage of McGoohan driving in his Lotus when it clearly.
Well, hey, I'll beat you on that one. As soon as he arrives at number 2's, they pull back the camera, and they have completely different actors for the Colonel and number 2.
I know,
and they've got terrible wigs on, and it's just like, okay, I know that you had to do takeaway shots, but my God, could you not get Nigel Stockback to do these?
They have scenes where he is in the car, like they have the car parked and he gets out of the car. I mean, couldn't they have done? I mean, I understand a lot of aerial shots that they had. They're not going to go rent a helicopter and shoot Nigel driving around the city. I mean, I get that, but even the beginning shots of McGoohan replaying using the shots from the opening credit sequence, and it's supposed to be a different guy. And I'm sure when this was originally broadcast, because the lower resolution of television, they figured, we'll get away with it. But now watching it on Blu-ray and seeing these new remastered transfers, it's like, nope.
But even I remember watching it back in 1990. That's when I first saw it. I remember watching it and thinking, that's just McGoohan in his Lotus.
Right. Because we're looking for that. When you're going to do an episode like this, I mean, you got to go all in, or it's very difficult for the audience to believe it.
And what were TVs in those days? 360?
They were less than that in America. And you had PAL. We had like 240 lines of resolution. It was not great. And most people didn't have great TVs anyway. They were small. Yeah. People didn't have giant TVs. But
we had a huge TV. It was the one thing that we invested the money in, and it was a staggering 28 inches.
Wow.
Which is the size of one of my monitors right in front of me here.
Yeah.
2 monitors, 28 inches. That was our family television in 1990. We're sat way back on the sofa and the chairs, watching a 28-inch television, thinking, huge.
Aren't we stoked?
Huge.
Well, how about finding out that number 6 had a fiance?
Yes, brilliant. Well, I mean, look, we're jumping the gun a bit.
Yeah, we are. Sorry.
The Colonel's been brought in because of he's not aware of Seltzman whatsoever. But what they need is a body. They need a man about town. Because the last person to see Seltzman and his mind swapping ability was our friend, number 6, the prisoner. So they get a bunch of Nazis to drag him out of his house. And then they must have cotched him, because he's laid out at the back of the ambulance. They strap him to the machine and they say, right, we need to put him into you, and we're going to plant the thought that he needs to get to Seltzman. We're going to kind of have that go around in his brain, and we need your body to do it. Sure, whatever. So they do that. What? Oh God, I can tell I'm getting old, because when he wakes up in his house, he's waking up on that little, like, chaiselongy bed, whatever it is, in the corner of the room. Dude, you sleep there when the wife kicks you out of bed.
Right.
You've got this beautiful Buckingham Place, number 1 Buckingham Place terrace, which is probably absolutely gorgeous. You've definitely got an upstairs. We see stairs. That's where the master bedroom is. Why are you sleeping on this little cot? Well, I mean, we know why, but it was just funny. And then he wakes up and his bureau's there, and but we get the voice of McGoohan. He was able to do some voice lines, and we see it clearly holding a camera in one hand, and the other hand being free to do everything really awkwardly because you know that he's holding the camera with the other hand, and he's just looking through his diary and stuff. And then, oh yes, it's Janice's. Is it Janice?
It's Janet.
Janet, not Janice. Yeah. Janet's birthday, and then he does that wonderful walk past the window, and then
right.
That's not me. That's someone else. That is. Then we see that number 6 is actually inside the body of the Colonel. And then immediately knock at the door. Janet is at the door, who is number 6's fiance.
I mean, this is a kind of a big revelation.
Yeah. Maybe that's why, he's been steering away from the other women's. He's been faithful to his bride-to-be.
Yeah.
Understanding that I will escape. Determined that he will escape and go back to the love of his life. And she was about 35-ish at the time. Kind of thought she looked a bit older, though. She kind of looked older than him.
Yeah, she did look older than I would have thought.
I think it's just the way the dress and the hair and the makeup and stuff at the time. It kind of put years on. Years on women who you didn't really think were that sort of age. And then she's like, "Oh, I saw his car outside. Is he back?" And he's kind of like, "Yeah, kinda, sorta, maybe."
Yeah.
And he thinks about telling her, and then he's just like, God, no, how is she going to believe that I'm him in this body? So he kind of plays it cryptically. Now, this is why I think it was miscast, because Nigel Stock did not act like number 6. If you wanted to use that actor and use it properly, he had to learn McGoohan's mannerisms. And he didn't. He had his own mannerisms. And to me, that was a wee bit immersion breaking. Because McGoohan is very, very specific. And so you really would have had to see the way that he moves, see the way that he turns, kind of the way that he speaks. Kind of speaks very sort of, up and down, depending on what he wants to say.
Right. Yeah, I did miss a little bit of that. But for me, when I'm watching things like this, I think about this, but I always am looking for solutions. Like in my mind, I'm like, well, he should have been more McGoohan-like, but I'm thinking maybe in the transfer process, the original body's mannerisms are still, so I'm always trying to do that.
Okay. No, all right, I'll buy that. I'll buy that.
But then again, you find out that his
amalgamation of the two.
Yeah, but his handwriting is the same, and you'd think that if the handwriting is the same, then other mannerisms would be the same. The talking would be the same. I'm sure this actor, they didn't have enough time. Like nowadays, they would have thought of that, but at the time, they're like, they wrote this episode quickly, put it into production, and probably who had seen the show. So how do you match McGoohan's mannerisms? I mean, would they have had him come in to watch other episodes? It could have been a directing thing.
That's the craft, darling.
Yes. But I do like his performance, though. There's something about watching him.
But it's good.
Yeah, I found him a compelling. Once you get past the fact that he is a very stocky, bigger guy than McGoohan, I found myself sitting down and I just was really enjoying, because what's great about the way this is written still is McGoohan doesn't walk around going, well, how am I going to convince these people? He immediately knows. He's like, I'm going to tell you something and only you would know. So there isn't a lot of, he's not contemplative about this. He just goes right in and understands, I'm going to start saying things to people that only I would know about them. And it was really, in that way, it's very smart. It's not like, oh, woe is me. How am I going to convince people? And when you meet her father later, both of these,
yeah. Oh, was it the Colonel?
Yeah.
No, Sir Charles.
Sir Charles is, her father, and what's great is he doesn't just go. Sir Charles says, "Well, oh, I believe you." He's like, "You could have heard that when somebody was being tortured or when they were being brainwashed. Or give me a break."
I need to pull you back again. Right? Because there's some interesting information before then. When he arrives at the headquarters and does quite an embarrassing shake of the guy, he says to him, he tells the chap behind the desk who he is,
Oh, and it's great. Not only who he is,
but he says, us Brits will appreciate this. So I don't know if you appreciated this, but he says to him, you took elocution lessons because you were from Bootle. Now, I don't know if you know where Bootle is.
No idea.
Bootle is on the Mersey. It's the other side of the Mersey, south of the Mersey. Mersey. Oh my God, my brain. Which is Liverpool. And so if you're from Bootle, you got like Scouse accent like this. You see, if I'm from Bootle. And so to get a bit, something like this is really, really. So you have to, to have elocution lessons to get rid of. You see, so that's what they were saying. You're a Scouse Scally. You were a Scouse Scally, and you had to take elocution lessons to get rid of that Scouse.
And that's just the beginning of the insults he throws at this guy. I mean, he basically number 6 destroys this guy. Like, this guy's a total tool.
He used the shit out of him.
Yeah. I mean, you look at this guy going, "Wow, how does he even get to work here when being such a tool? This guy's such a douche."
Well, he said you got put behind this desk because it was requested by the typing pool. Yeah, it's a sex pest by the sound of it. Then he threatens him with what he did in 1958, 10 years ago.
When you went to Paris.
10 years ago, dude. What was her name again? Oh, what did he do to that poor girl? What took her at the wrong one, probably. I don't know. It was just like hilarious. But then he goes with Potter. No, I don't think it's with Potter then. Potter comes out afterwards. But he goes up this kind of futuristic lift. Now, do you know where they were?
No.
At the TV studio.
Yeah, okay.
That was the TV studio. So, and they had this lift, which is used for,
Sure.
And they just thought, this looks perfect as a weird ass secret agent building lift. Let's just film it here. So they filmed that lift going up with like the open up, no, just there. So they filmed that. They filmed the going up and they filmed the going down. Then they go into the office to see Sir Charles. So there's some interesting things before he gets to speak to Sir Charles. But but he doesn't give his real name. He calls himself, PK362.
Right, but all that craft is all. I loved all of that because it's the lore of this agency. You wouldn't know me as this. You would know me as this. Yeah. And it was and what's really interesting is the whole time they know he's telling the truth. They know because this is all part of this elaborate plan because they're trying to find this doctor. And and yet they play it really, really. I love the way this episode really. I hate number 6's superiors. I hate the fact that all of these guys, he keeps coming back to his old place of employment, and all they do is keep fucking with him. I mean, it's they just. I mean, I really would love to see like a follow-up TV movie where the prisoner just he kills all of them. He comes back and he just kills everyone for abusing him for now we know at least a year. It's been a year. All of you deserve to die.
There's lots of interpretation about what happens at the end of Fallout.
That's true.
We'll get to in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks. This would have been Fallout if I hadn't been poorly. So that's crazy. So they, of course they don't mention any of the stills that they nicked.
Right.
And the fact that they're in on it, to me, clearly shows that they're in on the whole thing.
They're in on the whole thing.
Yeah, with the village, which is interesting because they say at the end, are your own people in on it? And he's just like, I think he disregards it, but it's just like, no, they are. They are. You've had so much evidence to say that they are.
Yeah, and I do love the fact that at the beginning, the colonel has clearly been dispatched by the what I guess number 6's superiors too, and he's all business. He's like, I'm here to do a job, but this is really definitive proof just how much. Not that we haven't had enough already, but this is just my father-in-law is fucking with me now. Or my future father-in-law, unrepentantly knowing exactly I'm telling the truth, and yet, nope, not going to give you any.
I want to go fuck with my roses.
Yeah.
So he's thinking, I need all this bollocks.
Right.
I want to go prune my roses, mate. You go off and do yourself some business. Go on, shoo. Scally. Shoo. So he leaves disappointed because they're just like, well, you could be, but whatever. You've given us all the information that but whatever. Somebody else could have. You could have done that through hypnosis. Wow. So he goes away, empty-handed. Then Potter starts following him. I think Potter does a great performance as an agent in this episode. So I don't think he barely says a word, if a word, but just the look on his face and his mannerisms. He speaks because he's having a cigarette at one point and stuff, and radioing at one point. But he just comes across as like Mr. Agent Man. So he goes from there. Does he go to the shop? Does he go to the photo shop with an incredible exchange of dialogue? Holy cow, this scene must have been amazing. I'm surprised none of them burst into laughter.
I love the proprietor of the shop.
Yeah, he's awesome.
I love the actor, and she's just great. I love he's trying to keep that stiff upper lip, keep everything on the up and up. Business, I'm going to protect my business, even though there was some shenanigans. I love the whole scene.
Well, that's just it. You don't know whether or not he's just a business proprietor that's done some shenanigans for a couple of shillings, or whether or not he's in on it. He's been planted in there, and he's trying to not to act nefarious, but kind of get away with every line.
I think he's exactly what you just said. He's totally in on it, and he's completely like, whether he works for the company, call it the company, whoever they are, or not. I mean, it's. I mean, once numbers, and it's like the guy knows that number 6 knows. So,
because we've been signed for already. Well, that's because we gave it to someone else. And,
like, wait, what? Oh, and they brought it back when they figured out the mistake.
But they have all that, and I'm just like, fair enough. Everything's like fair enough. And then it's like they just decided to ad-lib, and they just said, I need a photograph for a passport. And then he just looks and it's just like, well, a man who does the photographs is afraid he's on holiday at the moment. Well, of course he would be. So, as you say, sir. And then there's like this awkward silence, and then he just says, I mean, I could do a passable job. It's just like, what? It was just him.
And I could make you look okay. I'll make you look okay. Whatever however he puts it.
Presentable enough for the authorities, for the passport authorities. I was wetting myself laughing at it.
No, it's very funny.
It's just great. So he takes the film, goes back to his house, draws his curtains. Potter decides to report that. He's drawn his curtains, sir. He's drawn his curtains. Okay, Potter. Trimming.
I really didn't like, though, like, these guys are not very good at being conspicuous. You see when number 6, when he sees that the guy tailing him is sitting right outside the door of the photo, like, couldn't they do a better job of following him?
The beauty is the undertakers are following him everywhere.
Right.
We see them following him in London. We see them on Buckingham Place. We see them at the photo shop. You know, they're everywhere. They are following his every move because they got to bring him back. If you know, got to bring the boy back.
Right. If he steps out of line.
Well, as soon as he gets Seltzman, gas time. Time to go home. So yeah, and that was a bit I didn't like. Number 6, counting on his bloody fingers.
Yeah, that.
A, B, C, D, E. That's 5. No. No. I know that it was meant to be visually for us to say this is the code. The code is the number that corresponds to the letter in the alphabet. The show has opened, you know, the public to much bigger things than that.
Yes.
We could have worked it out. You could have just done E. That's the 5th letter. That's all he had to say. And then he could have just done 22.
Yep. I think that was a direction thing. You know, the director probably did that. But it was a little wacky.
David.
We didn't need that.
Morty. Yeah. It was a bit demeaning, I thought.
It's not like code breaking hadn't become a trope in movies at this point either. Like everybody had seen it, whether it was in Bond films or World War II movies or whatever. This was definitely something they didn't have to go down that road. But you know, look, it's still a TV show. And back then, there are certain people, you know, in the late 60s that probably might not have got it,
maybe
you know.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, maybe I'm, again.
In case you weren't understanding what we're trying to do.
53 years later, okay, maybe. Maybe some people haven't quite gone to college yet. But it's like, it's a clever little code. There were certain letters of Seltzman that corresponded to the slide. And then you had to overlap all the slides to get the location of where Seltzman was, which is in Austria. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of it. But it was in Austria. And then we get Top Secret starring Val Kilmer and Peter Cushing.
How about driving a Lotus into the Austrian Alps? A convertible Lotus. That's got to be fun.
Well, that's why Poppy was way behind, you see. The little beeping radar. Beep.
But he would be cold. You know, I just find it so interesting because, you know, London, known for its sunny skies all the time and its warmth and lack of precipitation. Having a convertible Lotus is probably the most, I don't know. Yeah. not exactly.
Perfect car. Being rusted outside the front of Buckingham Place. That's where it would be. Just be rust.
Right.
If that thing didn't have a tarpaulin or a garage to get put in overnight and a nice little heat to keep it. Ay. So he arrives at Val Kilmer's Top Secret set and I'm just a barber sub. Would you like a shave? I'm gonna again. It was just another line that I wet myself laughing at. He tries to put the bib on him before he shaves him, and he grabs Seltzman's hand and he says, "I'm gonna be honest with you. I haven't come here for a shave." I was like, "Stop it! You're killing me. You're killing me now. This is hilarious. This is a great comedy episode at times."
By the way, the professor, the actor who plays Saltzman, is it Saltzman? Seltzman, he's great. I love that guy. I mean, he was great.
We totally missed the party, by the way, with his fiance. We totally forgot that.
Yeah.
He goes to a party with his fiance, and she realizes it's him, and they have a snog, and he might have banged her. I'm not sure. Because it kind of faded to black.
Well, yeah, I mean, when he goes to the fiance's party, what I did like about that scene is the ritualistic way in which he kisses her. They've got their private little cheek to cheek and bridge of the nose, and that was something. And then she kisses him, and I really like that. She kisses him back, and I like the fact that she knows it's him, you know, and that's why I thought that was amazing. That whatever intimacy that they have, it transcends. She was able to understand. She's probably kissed a lot of guys in her life, but no one kisses her like number 6 does.
Giddy.
And
an interesting thing about that scene as well is the reason why they were so close up on them in the party is because they thought they were done with the scene and they were tearing the set down.
right.
So they had half a set to work on when they realized they hadn't got what they wanted and had to film some more. So they're just like, right, we're just gonna have to keep it close. So I think it was a set for a different show which they hijacked.
Yeah.
And they were like, we got to start tearing it down, mate. We got to start tearing it down. So they're just like, quick, start filming. And it was like half of the scene had been ripped down, and so there's another great story behind that scene. So yeah, we have the salesman in the barber shop, and then he says, the last time that you saw me, I looked like this, and we had earlier, of course, when he wrote down, and his handwriting was the same, and Seltzman was just like, well, you could have got that from the person himself.
Right.
It's just like, yes, and everything I can say, you can counter, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, I sent you a letter. Would you say that handwriting is, no two handwritings the same? Yeah, I'll go along with that. So he gets the letter that he wrote, which he didn't throw away. Another thing was just like, somebody would stupid if they held on to that letter, wouldn't they? It's like, all right, you made your point. He's like, but I'm a stupid old man, so I kept the letter. So he gets the letter and he writes down something and he corresponds. He's like, oh my God, it's you. And he's like, yep, your shit work, dude. I'm in another body. So it's just like, yes, there is a reversion process. And then one by one, they all start coming in after him. Potter comes in, gets involved in a fight. I like the way that Potter came in and just went, say six, just don't move, Dr. Salesman. just straight looking for number 6. And then of course our friends the Undertakers came in and just like, gassing time.
That was kind of a cool gas weapon they had, it's I don't know how they weren't affected. It's not like they weren't wearing gas masks or anything.
I know it's going in that direction, but it is airborne, and
right.
so you might wonder, maybe they're immune. They sniff this thing so fucking much. They bring so many people to the village, they're just immune to. Oh,
good to me.
Yeah, it keeps me going. Then they get dragged back to the village, where number 2 is like, can you can reverse them? And he's like, well, I will, but. I do it on my own. So like, all right, that's fine. Cameras, watch everything.
Yeah.
And so he needs his 12 hours to prepare. He's an old man. He needs a little rest, doesn't he? Bless him. And then they put number 6. You see McGoohan, because McGoohan could film the last scene. So they had McGoohan in internet gas. Yes. They had McGoohan on one. They had Nigel Stock on the other, and then Seltzman presses his buttons, and they're all like, "Ooh, everyone, pay attention to exactly."
By the way, I did love. I don't know if it was enhanced for the Blu-ray, if it looked, but I did love the animation that they have for this device. It's really cool. I really enjoyed it.
It's a good special effect, wasn't it?
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
I distinctly thought, oh my God, that's a really good special effect.
Yeah, it's cool.
67, 68. And so Seltzman sits between them and sort of like relaying through him to swap. And then Seltzman kind of like yanks the wires out and sort of has a heart attack or something, keels over. And then number 2 is like, emergency, emergency, emergency. So they get people in, and then the colonel's just like straight off the table, dressed. I am ready to go, dude. So number 2 comes in, is just like, you'll be rewarded for your service. Thank you very much indeed. Helicopter's outside, mate. Jog on. Don't worry about a debrief or anything like that. Off you go, mate. And then they go to Seltzman's body, and he's just like, I did my best. Tell number 1. And then number 2's kind of like, that's a bit weird for Seltzman to say. And then number 6 gets up and is like, yeah, you guessed it. Seltzman's transferred himself into the colonel. and the colonel into Saltzman's body, and now Saltzman's just gone off on a helicopter to continue his experiments with swapping people's bodies in peace. And it's just like, okay. And then we had the
Well, the one thing about, like, I enjoyed this episode from a purely pulp science fiction-y, Mission Impossible, Turnabout Intruder sort of a way. I enjoyed it, but I don't think, and I did enjoy learning about the prisoner's life before the village, and the fact that he had a fiance. I mean, the fiance, she seemed a little demure for me. Like, I would expect somebody that the prisoner was engaged to could throw out a lot of witty bon mots, would be somebody really tough. But the fact that she was very proper, sort of proper English, she reminded me, she the way I thought of like a proper English girl in the 60s, that's who she reminded me of. And maybe that's what number 6 wanted. She didn't want like a Bond girl, or he didn't want a Bond girl or something. He wanted her. But I liked all of that, and I liked seeing her interaction with her father, and I did like these things, but I don't think this episode has a lot of resonance beyond what we're watching.
I thought it was very much an entertainment episode.
Yes.
I don't think there was particularly any deep meaning here. It kind of opened up a couple of pieces of information that we didn't know that were interesting, which kind of, we discovered that the prisoner's been kidnapped for a year now.
Yes, and that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, because he's got no concept of time on the village, because God knows what date it really is. And we've discussed before, goodness knows how long when he gets dragged out somewhere he's actually been out for. So he's got no true concept of time at all, and he couldn't believe it was a year. So for him, it probably felt a lot sooner. And then the fiance business. So I just thought this was an entertaining episode,
right?
Which was meant to go in the guise of a John Drake mystery, and didn't think there was too much more than that, but it was entertaining. I did think this is an entertaining episode.
Yeah, no, I did too. I did too, and it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed watching it this time. I just, we expect that the prisoner as a whole, the back half of the series, it sort of moves away from the resonance that it has in terms of asking the central questions of the show. What is identity? Who is a person? What makes up, like, and I find that, like, we have these 17 episodes of the show, and the fact that a good percentage of them, whether it was The Girl Who Was Death and this, and they just sort of stray from, and that's because McGoohan only wanted to do 7 episodes, and they had to have these filler episodes, that's just a reality. But I really wish that with these quote unquote entertainment episodes, I mean, they really could have used this as a really interesting way to tell a story about identity. Waking up in the body of another person. What does that mean? Like, who is a person? What are they really? And they went the other way. And they made an entertaining episode, which I thought was great, but so close to, now we're going into and of course, look, television is a lot different now. We talked earlier with our letter writer, Kevin's letter, the way things go in television and entertainment now is very, very different than it was at the time. And remember, at the time, the prisoner had not become this phenomenon that had endured for over 50 years, that had become so influential. It was just to show that this isn't exactly the smoothest sailing of all TV shows that have been made in the history of TV. This had a lot of drawbacks, and in this case, their lead star lights off to go co-star in Ice Station Zebra. Then now what do we do?
Well, I mean, we got a very focused McGoohan at the start. Then we got a very kind of all over the place McGoohan, and then a mental breakdown McGoohan, then a I can't be bothered with the show anymore, McGoohan. I'm off, you know, and then I've got to finish this, McGoohan. So, you know, we have many different stages of McGoohanisms throughout, and I think it's very much reflected in the themes thematically.
Yeah.
In the episodes, as opposed to the quality, because you know, I still think episodes like Living in Harmony, great episode.
Right.
This is a solid 7, if you ask me. This episode.
Well, purely from an entertainment perspective.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, a couple of tweaks, this could have been brilliant. You know, I think if they got the kernel slightly different, the mannerisms slightly different, maybe streamline the story a wee bit, so we got more personal interaction with his fiancée, and like I said, maybe posing the question of just exactly what is identity.
Yeah, and who is it that
a person?
Who? Yeah, and I hark back to like Star Trek, and lately everyone's talking about trills because they're in Discovery. But I love the idea of these symbiotes when they get moved into the bodies of other humanoid hosts. Can somebody, like the first time we met Odon in Next Generation, the first time we see a trill, that Beverly Crusher can't love someone who's, I mean, she's able to love Riker when Odon is inside Riker, but what does it mean? What does identity mean? And they could have really delved into the fact that number 6, if I had written this episode, I would have made number 6's fiance the linchpin of the episode, that he has to convince her, because without her help, he can't do what he needs to do. But in his case, it's not that. That's not what kind of an episode it is. You know, it's not. It's not really about necessarily him. He's just a means to an end, so his superiors can find this doctor. So what happens with him? He doesn't try and turn the tables on them or anything. He's just he's very single-minded in this episode. Yeah.
He's not trying to muck about. He's getting mucked about, but he's not trying to muck about.
No, he's not trying to do anything.
Yeah, he's got a very specific direction, which is Seltzman. And yeah, it would have been nice. I think let's say if the prisoner was made today, I think we probably would have a lot more interaction with Janet, and fleshed her out more as a character.
Yeah.
When we do, can we officially say this? When we do The Modern Prisoner 2009,
I guess we can say that we're doing that now.
When we do the 6 episodes of The Modern Prisoner, and kind of, I think a lot of that will probably be equating to the original.
Are we going to do it on an episode by episode basis, or just do one show?
I think an episode by episode basis.
All right.
Because every episode's worthy of its own discussion. You know, he has this bizarre menage a trois relationship,
right?
You know, with Peggy Carter and the other lass. You know, he's got one in the real.
How does Steve Rogers feel about that?
Well, he got there first. Mr. Caviezel got there first. Captain America was what, 2011?
Mm-hmm.
So this is 2009. So sorry, mate. He beat you to it. He crushed that puss before you did. And you know, he's got one in the dream world. He's got one in the real world, because this prisoner is very different. Very different, folks. It's kind of like, you know that metaphor? Yeah, we're just gonna put it out there. Okay. God damn it. Subtlety? What? Subtlety? What? Subtlety? Don't know what's he saying. Don't know what he's saying. Yeah, it's kind of like that, but I think it's worthy of its own talk. I think before we go there, though, we're going to have a couple of interesting one-off episodes.
Yes, we're going to do
that to break that. Or do we go straight into it? I don't know. We'll discuss it anyway. So yeah, I think if it was, if that was made today, we would have had a much more fleshed out Janet. But I did think that the bit that they had together in the party was beautiful.
I did too.
You know, when he did the little kiss, you know, like I said, he kissed her on the right cheek and then the left cheek and then the tip of her nose, and
No, that's definitely.
He like nuzzled her a little bit, and then she was just like, kiss me, baby, kiss me.
It's a really great scene. I love that scene. I actually genuinely think that's expressive. A great scene. Yeah,
she was because Nigel Stott, God bless his heart, he didn't exhibit great range, other than frown. There wasn't great range, and it was nice to see a little bit of emotion in there with our Janet, because even the number 2 was very sort of, he felt as if he should have been at Studio 54, just going, cool, man. Cool.
I do like him though.
Oh yeah, there was something there's just something very cool,
he's got that he's got that hipster hair, and he's just
Yeah, it's a bit like Darren Nesbitt a little bit. He's just kind of got that hair. The glasses not quite as extreme because he's a bit older than Darren Nesbitt, but yeah, sort of same.
Yeah, I kept looking at his hair going, I could have hair like his. I was like, I'm going to cut my hair like his, and I want to be I want to be an aging London hep cat, that I would have been hitting the club scene.
You could have seen him 20 years ago on a motorcycle with a chain around his...
He was a mod. He was a mod fighting the rockers on the beach in Quadrophenia.
Yeah. Yeah. It could happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just it was a great little just a great little spy episode, really.
Yeah.
And again, more assertions to John Drake with Potter and such, little nods all over this goddamn show.
Yes.
How they could even turn around and say it's not John Drake is I would have said, sir, you do us a disservice by saying that, sir.
Well, then they would have to pay all the writers' residuals.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, no, it's not John Drake. Nope.
Yeah, that's it. People say that guy, he would just be in a jazz club, a cool jazz club. Yeah, or reading poetry, that weird.
Yeah,
poetry.
like a beat, like he'd be into Allen Ginsberg and the beats.
Sun's up, music sings. Just one of those sort of, lighting cigarettes, sitting on things.
But I liked him. He was good. But yeah, this is a great episode. We don't have that many questions or super chats, but we could get through a few. Actually, we only have one.
Right.
We only have one.
Oh my God!
I know. Shane O'Reilly sends in 2 super chats. I want to thank you for that, Shane. But Anonymous writes in and says, I enjoyed this episode, as I have all of them. I watched a prisoner documentary featuring McGoohan's daughter. I enjoyed that until it went into some detail about Fallout and who number 1 was. So after this episode, I went ahead and finished the series.
Okay.
Well, if they hadn't seen it before.
We've ruined it plenty of times. So.
Yeah, I mean, we really have. Well, but I think, can you really ruin Fallout? I mean, it's kind of like The Matrix. You can't. No one can tell you. No one can tell you what The Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. No one can tell you what Fallout is. You have to see it for yourself.
Well, yeah, because if you don't want to know who number 1 is, just block your ears for a little bit. Just 30 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Because we say number 1 is McGoohan, but then number 1 clearly isn't McGoohan.
Right. Well, I think
so. It's just like,
Well, it's really interesting to me. The idea is that if you're looking at this show as we as viewers now, I think we're conditioned to want answers, like definitively. Like, there has to be a number 1. There's an organization that we've seen. There's a clear-cut chain of command in this organization. But really, the show itself isn't so concerned with that. It's the idea. If you watch the opening credits, I will not be stamped, brief, debrief, numbered.
But don't you think that's why the 2009 show falls apart? Because it explains everything.
Well, yeah, and
The
what's
minutia.
yeah, and I do, I do, because the whole question of these things are sort of open ended, and they're questions that an individual throughout their lives never stops grappling with, and I think what's really interesting in a human being's life, your identity changes.
Yeah.
You grow up, and if you fall in love, you could become a parent. You become a spouse, a husband, or a wife, and there are so who you are and what life and what other people mean to you constantly change. But the only person who knows the answers is yourself. Only you can answer questions of identity, and who you think you are. Other people will always define you. There will be other people. I think externally, you're constantly being redefined by the people around you, your loved ones, and the greater people at work or the people that you know. But really what this show is most concerned with is, who do we think we are? Who do we as ourselves, as individuals, how do we perceive ourselves? And one of the things that I really like about this show is the way we perceive ourselves doesn't necessarily, like, I'm still a 12-year-old kid as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a middle-aged man that still gets just as excited about action figures and books and video games and model kits and movies as I did when I was 12, which to be honest, is a problem for me. Because as other people have sort of grown up and become adults, like, I look at people that have stock portfolios, and I look at people that command $100 million industries, and I'm like, how the hell did you like?
I have my prime one statues.
Yeah, I mean, I know I can't even fathom that, and I think it's actually been, for me, it's been harmful in my career because I've never been able to get rid of, like, I talk to people that are reasonably my own age, and I think of them as adults. And I don't think of myself as one. Like, and it's a problem. Like, I try and I go into business meetings, and I try and be an adult, and I try and speak like somebody who knows what they're doing. Like, if you are going to give me millions of dollars for a film budget or something, I can manage that money and I can get something made. But at the same time, I'm really just thinking about, I really need to get model paint for, my pod from 2001. And it's and I think part of that is because people think about growing up and becoming a captain of industry. I just thought about growing up and still do the same stuff I did when I was a kid. Like, I want to make movies of comic books, and it's been there's no transition point, and I found it in my adult life. Here I'm being all like I'm in a therapist's office or something. But I think the question of an individual's identity and how we perceive ourselves and how the world around us perceives us is a central conceit of this show. Because the way that the village and the way that all these people perceive, number one, they want something, which is they want to know why he resigned. They want this information. And in McGoohan's case, in number 6's case, by giving away whatever information is, you're destroying what you are as an individual. You are compromising how you see yourself. So if he were to ever do that, he would compromise his own self-image in what he believes, how he believes he is a person. And if he ever gave it up, he wouldn't be that person anymore. So his individuality would be destroyed. And yet,
it'd be the same as you, though. If you tomorrow said, I need to be an adult, and I need to get rid of all of this stuff, and you get rid of all this stuff, you would actually be compromising who you actually are.
That was yes, and that's my point. And I wish, I mean, I bet there's a time, like, I wonder, so far I haven't been disappointed because I've managed to somehow walk a tightrope as this 12-year-old who's hiding in a middle-aged man's body, and I've still been able.
It's big all over again.
Yeah, it's like that. I mean, Truckapillar. See, I'd be the guy. Oh, that's Truckapillar. That's great. I love that. Great. It's a building that turns into a robot. That's no fun. You need it to be a jet fighter that turns into a robot. Like in Robotech. But I think that's a central theme of this movie, the idea of being an individual. And I think that's really important, because in this day and age, what I find very interesting is that we are creating false identities for ourselves. Like when you take selfies now, we have filters. Even the pictures we take of ourselves aren't real anymore because they're filtered through the way we want to believe we look as opposed to how we really look. And that's kind of an interesting place to be at as a society. And I think the problem with the later Prisoner, the miniseries, is that it kind of dispenses with all of these ideas because it answers these questions. And the whole point is that the questions they're rhetorical. They're not meant to be answered. They're meant to be constantly contemplated. And that's why the show endures.
Yes. The best questions are rhetorical questions. Closed questions, there's nowhere to go. They have a definitive answer. And that's where the 2009 series ultimately, to me, fell apart. Is it was all too keen to explain its brilliance,
right,
in inverted commas. Look, we're so clever that this is what we're, and it's. I think they literally had a whole scene with Peggy Carter and number 6, literally just explaining, just exposition of exactly what was going on, and I was just like, why would you do this? But anyway, I mean, we'll get on to that with that. But I think there was I do think there was an opportunity lost with this episode to really delve into the theme of just what makes you a person.
Yes.
And if they kind of sort of got rid of the whole salesman business, and they were able to do the whole conversion themselves anyway, and pop somebody into number 6's body and pop somebody into someone else's body.
Yeah.
So different from Schizoid, where there's two of the same, and then have the other person run his life while he is an onlooker, so to speak, within that same circle. Does that break a man? How does that affect? So I think there was an interesting avenue to be explored, which wasn't, but then because of the nature of this episode and why it was created, that was never going to be the case anyway.
Right, of course. And
we get a breakdown of the individual next week. Oof.
Yes, we do. Scottish Nerd sent in a super chat. That was nice of him. And Andrew Matthews says, get R&B to watch Astartes?
Astartes.
What is Astartes?
Astartes is a fan-made Warhammer film.
Oh, I've watched that one where the troops are being taken in that ship and they go in space and invade another ship. No,
Astartes is probably it's recent. Came out, the last part 5 came out in. Well, they do attack a ship.
Yeah, that's what I think. I didn't realize that.
Did you see the sphere thing?
No.
Oh, okay. Part 5 is Part 5 is like the big part. It's 7 minutes long, and they get to this sphere, and that's all I'm going to say. It's fan made, and it's better than.
Oh, I loved it. So yeah, what I've seen, it's incredible. I mean, when I was working on the Axonar project, Alec Peters, the impresario of that project, loved Warhammer, and I was unfamiliar with Warhammer, and I was sort of immersed in it, and I loved it. I loved everything about it, but I'm like, there's no way I'm going to start buying the model kits. I'm not gonna. I wanted the army that looked like Jokers. I was like,
the Harley Quinn,
army. I'm like, I want this. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't. All this stuff was so cool. I'm looking at the prices, and I'm like, there's no way, because I loved all the sort of steampunk-esque spaceships that were also big armored thing. I'm like, I love this, but I'm not. I can't go down.
Crack for a reason.
Yeah, I can't do it.
I've got tons I paint,
Yeah, when you showed me that you got that figure, you got the painted figure and the unpainted figure, like some of the figure you had a couple weeks ago.
No, I paint myself. I actually paint figures myself, so I've got armies painted up and.
Yeah, because I would get that weekly magazine There's that weekly
White Dwarf.
Yeah, White Dwarf. I'm looking at this going, no way. I'm just going to look at this magazine and live vicariously through everyone else.
I did for a long time. Yeah.
But I did love what I haven't seen the whole. I didn't know the whole parts. I think I saw the first couple of parts of it. I saw them. They attacked a ship, and they were going through the corridors of the ship. That's all I saw.
Yeah, it's 5 parts. The most recent one I think was January-ish, and that's the final part of that Astarte series. And wow. It was just
very, very cool.
Mind-blowingly good.
Yeah, that's well. It seems to me that this is total aside, but the Warhammer 40K stuff's very, very interesting.
Oh yeah.
And I'm quite frankly, is there ever been a Warhammer video game?
Tons.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Lots of different ones. But you pick a genre. There's one made for you.
Yeah, just great stuff.
They should have done an MMORPG though. Holy cow. That would have been incredible. They were doing it and then they stopped. Anyway.
That's a total aside. But yes, Andrew, to answer your question, I thought what they did was amazingly impressive. Very, very cool.
You should see part 5. Part 5 and you'll be blown away by that being a fan-made. Absolutely insane. Somebody said earlier as well. It's just said after RMB's read that letter, can we just get straight to the Star Trek discussion? I thought it was quite funny.
Straight to the Star.
They had a little wink after it as well. So I thought it was pretty funny.
Well, no, I mean, this is really the last episode of what I would say is, we get into the 2-parter. So there's no more individual episodes of the show. Now, let me ask you a question. Because this was your idea, this show, should we still split up the next 2 episodes, or should we do them all on your channel? Both of them on your channel?
We do Once Upon a Time on my channel. We do Fallout on your channel.
All right. I just, I figured throw that out there.
This is a joint venture, sir.
No, it's true. But, I was thinking that we'd do it as a double header, but I think it's great that we split them up.
Yeah. They are, even though it's a 2-parter, they are separate episodes within themselves anyway.
Yeah, they're very different. So
it's just that the end of Once Upon a Time will immediately leads into Fallout. That's what makes it essentially like a 2-parter. But it's its own individual storyline, self-contained, and doesn't per se have any effect on Fallout apart from one character.
It is interesting as we get sort of to the end of our I mean, I can't believe we've done 15 of these shows now. This is our 15th show. As we get in here, it has been on my mind that this show, like Star Trek and like Doctor Who, the fact that it endures after 50 years. I mean, how many TV shows have endured for as long as this, and have this a remake, a miniseries, and the idea that great literature, I mean, obviously cinema has not been around for 200, 300, 400 years the same way that, say, Shakespeare's plays have been.
Well, did you know Mel Gibson wanted to make a prisoner film?
I heard that. And I think that, Jim Caviezel was Christ in Passion of the Christ. I think that maybe Jim Caviezel took that role because he'd probably heard about the show from Mel Gibson. I don't know if that's true.
Possibility. There's a link.
I mean, I actually moderated at the San Diego Comic-Con. I was asked to moderate the Prisoner panel before the miniseries, and I sat next to Jim Caviezel. And we had he's a a very nice guy.
Yeah.
But Ian McKellen was not on the panel, but it would have been. I know he couldn't have done it, but it would have been great if he was. But Jim Caviezel was, and it was really interesting. I mean, I had really high hopes for the miniseries, but I just think, again, it's hard when you are asked to recreate these things. I find it interesting because we live in a world where so many things are being rebooted and changed. And one of the things that I think, speaking about Star Trek, one of the things that I think we fall down on is that these things are products of their time. And ultimately there is a DNA that exists in the prisoner asking these very relevant questions, these rhetorical questions indeed, and when they're made later, a lot of the time these remakes fall short because the creators are their impulse is to answer these questions, or they're trying to make I find that storytellers today, in their efforts to try and make stories relevant with issues of the day, they're not thinking from a universal perspective. And I think that storytelling should be thought of as being we can't just appeal to audiences that live right now in 2020. We have to think about audiences that are going to watch these shows 50 years from now, or that audiences need to have stories where there's a universality to them. And I think one of the great things about The Prisoner is it does have that. It does have a universality to the questions that it's asking, and that's why it continues to resonate. And I think that's a failing of a lot of modern day programming, is they want to provide answers all the time.
Well, yeah. Well, yes and no. A lot of shows I think are started and they have no idea where they're going with them.
Right.
They have a sound concept. JJ is a perfect example. He can come up with concepts, but he can't nail endings at all. And also, yes, there is a desire to have a wrap up, but for example, with the 2009 Prisoner series, they weren't individual episodes.
Right.
They were individual episodes, but it was a 6-part miniseries that all followed itself. So essentially, it was a 3-hour, whatever, well, would it be more? 5-6 hour film. That's what essentially it was. It had the what we now know as the sort of modern day feel about it. Where TV is failing now is it's becoming partisan. That's where TV's. It's not just answer. You got hiccups?
No, I was just coughing.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hiccups. I was like, just hold your breath. Go. Hold your breath.
Yeah. No. But no, I think partisans. You're absolutely right about that. And storytelling isn't. You can, I guess, have partisan stories, but great stories are not partisan.
Yes.
They're not partisan. They're
universal. Yeah.
And I think that's. I mean, this The Prisoner certainly isn't.
No. No, there were too many. There were too many. I mean, because it balances entertainment and thought really just so well, that we can have these incredible discussions about this show, and at the same time be thoroughly entertained by the actual episode that we're watching. And that does take incredible skill, and it was a skill which was passed to some tremendous television shows throughout history. That there'd always be the balance of entertainment and thought-provoking content as well. Star Trek being a prime example of all of that. And then it started to go. Even shows as back in Smallville 2001, one of the greatest superhero television series has ever been, because what they did is they took the superhero element of Clark Kent, growing up, going through puberty, learning his powers, and they used learning his powers as metaphors for growing up, for growing up and moving into adulthood and understanding the family structure and how important family structure is, and all these so they used them as great little metaphors for various different things. And it got so popular they had to drag it on way longer than its natural life should have been. But you got six or so great series out of that before, seasons out of that before we're sort of, let's introduce Black Canary and all these others, just to pad out a show because it's still getting viewers. But we've lost that now. Like, Discovery is a prime example of just dishonesty. I call it a dishonest show. You read the synopsis of it. You listen to the people who are promoting it, and they'll be like, "It's such an emotional show," and you watch it, and it's not, because there's no. It's all forced. Everything is forced. There is no legitimate emotion which develops from that. There's nothing which stirs inside of me. Well, that's because of the way it's been written or acted or presented.
Well, the characters go through all of these emotions, and we as the viewer, I feel like I'm watching this going,
they don't make sense. Their emotions don't make sense comparative to what they're talking about.
No, and I have yet to see one episode of Discovery from beginning to end that actually tells a story that I believe in. You know, and I think I try and explain. People are always telling me, "Oh, the people that see things are not." I don't think the text itself supports, like, one scene does not lead into another and lead into another and lead into another and tell me a story that I'm following or feeling anything for, because nothing that happens on the show feels like it would unfold in real life. Like, if I was none of the characters now, they're 950 years in the future or whatever, none of them act like that this is something that they understood where they were going. You know, now we're suffering from PTSD, we're all sad. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't be sad. I mean, maybe a couple of years into your 1,000-year journey, you would be. But right now,
anyways, looking at you like,
you know, Star Trek, these characters are supposed to be exploring the unknown. So they're going into the ultimate unknown, which is a future that is completely unknowable until you get there. So they would be in exploration mode and study mode. Yeah, they would. Yes, and they're not. And, you know, doing an episode about PTSD, about how people are missing everybody and they have no connection to the present. I'm like, you've been there for about a week. Come on.
Yeah, but they're not interesting.
No.
I when I did my latest review, there was something I was going to say. I'll probably put it into next week's, because I'm sure this week's. So I'm sure that's going to be dog shit as well. But one thing that I watched these episodes, and for all the problems that I have with them, you can just pull yourself back and say, well, was it fun? You know, was it interesting?
Yeah.
At least, you know, yes, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, these people are wrong. But was the concept of the show interesting? And I'm just like, no. You know, it's the concepts of the show that are dull. There's nothing of interest there. So I'm not being entertained, and I'm not learning anything other than everyone on the ship is emotionally unstable and should never have been allowed in Starfleet.
Right. All of them. Every single person.
Every one of them. But the worst thing is, I think, for a show like that, the worst thing is I don't know half the names of the crew. Because they don't focus on any of the other members apart from Mikey fucking Spock. The savior of the universe. Like I said, I'm not even joking. It's going to be her that creates the big fucking bang at the beginning, and she's going to create the universe and all that kind of stuff. But I don't even know the names of the people. I think the first episode of Next Gen, I knew 90% of them on the first episode, if not all of them.
Well, if you think about the first episode of Encounter at Farpoint, where Patrick Stewart strides out on the bridge and he calls Data by his name. You know, and Data, yes. Would you agree, Mr. Data? You know, the mission Farpoint. I don't know the exact quote, but he comes out is intriguing. And then Data actually stands up. And it's funny because, you know, when they were filming that scene, Brent Spiner told me this, and it's in our documentaries. He says nobody knew whether Data's name was pronounced Data or Data.
Well,
and it wasn't until
the table read. This goes back to the table read, actually, because at the table read, Patrick Stewart was obviously reading first, and Patrick Stewart, of course, is British, and so you say Data, we say data.
Yeah.
You know, it's like beta,
Tomato.
And Patrick Stewart said data, and then they were all like, isn't it data? Because, as you know, this comes back in season 2 with Polanski. She actually calls him Data, and he says, "No, my name is Data." And so they made a rule there and then that the first person to read a name or a place, whatever it may be, that's the way that you pronounce it.
Yeah.
So Data became Data because of Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, but you knew all these people right away. But
Yes.
like you said, and it's because that there's no what's interesting is, in order to really understand a character, that character has to have some kind of a storyline where you're registering them. You're registering their character traits, you're registering their name. You know, it flows into you naturally. You get this, you glean this information by watching what's happening. But none of these storylines are really about the characters. They just have stuff that happens to the characters, but no one is really the focus of the story. They'll have like, oh, here's a few moments where we're going to deal with so-and-so's PTSD. And that'll happen. But in a normal Star Trek episode, they would deal with PTSD for the whole episode, and it would be metaphoric. You know, they would be like with Nog, and It's Only a Paper Moon, dealing with the loss of his leg, you know, in Deep Space Nine. But I find that these stories are so murky. I keep asking myself, what is the story here? Like, what is this week's story? And like, oh, we're going to go to the Federation the first time. We're going to meet the new Federation. That could have been a story into itself, but nope. We're there for 5 minutes. Now the Discovery has to go prove itself on a mission. So we're going to go to this seed and all of these things happen. Like, you ask yourself, why have they put all the seeds on this one little ship? Like, why wouldn't there be 100 seed repositories? Why is there only one?
Why was it trapped in a storm? When they removed it from the storm, why didn't they hail them? Why were there no responses to the hail? When they arrived on the ship, why didn't any of the crew greet them? Why weren't they suspicious or suspect that the crew hadn't greeted them? Or there was a blip and then it vanished from the sensors, dismissed straight away. This is just like everything that you could possibly do wrong as a Starfleet officer 101.
Right.
And it's just like, so was the storm, which played no further part in the episode when they tracked it away. Storm gone.
I mean, this little ship is being tossed in the middle of an ion storm, you know, and it's an ion storm that we've seen ion storms are doorways into alternate universes. I mean, they're pretty extreme. By the way, Martino Sumoni just sent a very generous super chat to the show. So thank you very much, Martino. That is very much appreciated. I feel like we should have a question from Martino, but he just supported the channel and supported the show. So thank you very much for that. I very much appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, we always digress to Discovery. But what's interesting to me is it really just comes down to effective storytelling. And a show has a central premise. Like, we know that every episode of The Prisoner is going to be number 6 protecting his identity against protecting his, basically he's protecting his free will, his mind, his opinions, protecting him against the oppressive forces of whether it's the state, whether it's and every episode, whatever that oppressive force is, it's either a large external force or it's a one person that he's pushing back against. But we all know the premise of the show. But what I find really interesting with Star Trek Discovery is, and same with Star Trek Picard, it doesn't have a central premise. Like, you'd ask, what is Discovery about? Like, what is it about? In Star Trek, we know that the Enterprise is on a 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, and to boldly go where no one's gone before. We know that's the premise of every episode of Star Trek. I don't know, when I watch Star Trek Discovery, what it's about, because I have no idea. And
I'll throw this back at you. If you were asked to describe what it was about, what would you say?
I would say Star Trek Discovery is a show about a bunch of dysfunctional people that are all on board a starship and they are trying to work through their dysfunction and hopefully survive to the end of the episodes. Because they're people that are shown as every episode is about their dysfunction. It's about how they are somehow incapable of doing their job, and somebody has to come along and help them achieve whatever their goals are.
Mikey Burnham.
Yeah, it's always, and I hate that. I don't want to watch a show about Star Trek. To me, is not about our main characters are not dysfunctional. And when they become dysfunctional, like in Amok Time, they become dysfunctional in a way that illuminates their character but it's atypical. You know, normally I want to watch functional characters that are able to achieve whatever goals that the story puts in front of them. But they've actually, now the new Star Trek is dysfunction is our function. You know, they come out and they've even said this. And I find that to be, I'd much rather see a character like number 6, Patrick McGoohan's number 6, who, despite whatever anybody throws his way, he's able to either stand up against it or thwart it or fight on to see another day.
And it's 53 years. And it's still more entertaining than 90% of the TV today, probably more. Than 90% of the television, because it's the balance. If you don't have the balance between entertainment and true storytelling, then your show's lost. You know, look at the fact that 53 years ago, we didn't have special effects as we do today. They were very basic.
Yeah.
We certainly had very limited CGI. Computer effects, you know, the beams which were coming down, we both thought, oh, no, they're blooming good actually for 67, 68, and so you had to rely on good, solid storytelling. Nowadays, I think there's such an over-reliance on things looking flashy. Disco is all pants and no trousers. Which we say in Yorkshire. Some people say it differently around the country, but we say it's no pants, no trousers. Which you know, it's all show and no substance. And same with Picard. You know, you had a Kurtzman come out and say, "Please give this show a go. We've put all our heart and soul into it." And I'm just like, let your work speak for itself. You know, don't try and come out and emotionally blackmail people saying, you know, please beg, please give it. No. Your work should speak for itself. You should be coming out and going, created a great story for you. Really, you know, excited for you guys to see it. Think it's going to take on a wonderful journey. But you can't say that because it was dog shit. And it was back and forth and it had no direction. And there were like 10 episodes and 8 of them were complete filler. And none of it made sense with the Borg cube. And why? What? Everything elaborate set up for one robot that had been active for 6 months. How on earth did he get a Borg? You know, all of this nonsense. None of it making a lick of sense. Because you got all your flash, you got all your CGI, you got all your beautiful ships, got all your lighting and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have story, if you don't have a genuine direction on where you're going, a true vision on where you're going, you ain't going to get a show.
No, and you have to ask yourself, like, you know, number 6, it's stated at the beginning of every episode what the conflict and what the show is about. And with a show like Picard, you never know. Like, they'll pay lip service to be like, okay, Captain Picard's clearly not the Picard we knew, but I was really interested in the fact that I read a book by one of my favorite writers, Dan Simmons, and he wrote a book called Phases of Gravity. And the book, in a nutshell, is basically about, it's a fictional story, but it's about an astronaut who landed on the moon. And now he's in middle age. He has a son that he's estranged from. And the central question is, when you've landed on the moon in your early 30s or whatever, that is the best thing that you're ever going to achieve in your entire life. There's nothing else that's going to be better than that particular achievement. Not to the world around you, and maybe not to yourself. But you still have another perhaps 60 years of life left on the planet. So how do you, as a person, when you know that literally the most important thing that you've ever done is behind you, how do you then live your life and make your life relevant to both yourselves and then maybe, or make to yourself and then maybe the world at large? How do you do that? And I guess I walked into a show like Picard thinking maybe that's kind of where they're going to take this show. If you're Jean-Luc Picard and you are, and they kind of did, but not really. They didn't really make it about him. Like every episode should have been him focusing on this aspect of himself. The central focus should never have been taken off of him. And yet they gave him a bunch of other characters that strayed away from the central idea of Picard. Like, I'm writing books now. I didn't believe any of that. And the thing is, Picard had other interests, like archaeology being one of them. You know, he had other things, and they just turned him into a generic character that, oh, I'm old, I'm sitting here on my he was no longer Jean-Luc Picard. He was generic old guy. And yeah, it's in a science fiction show, and they brought all these elements or whatever, but they never told a real story about Jean-Luc Picard, like from episode to episode to episode.
There was the Jean-Luc Picard apology tour that he was going on.
Yeah, well, there was, yes, but that to me is, and I think what's interesting about The Prisoner is it never strays away from that central conceit of here is one man fighting to retain his identity in the face of incredible odds and incredible adversity, and he never stops that fight. And the fight,
that's a strong premise. That's a strong premise that everybody can understand and relate to.
Yes,
losing oneself, losing. You know, people talk about Alzheimer's and dementia and stuff like that, and the scariest part is losing yourself. So, you know, this is something
that's what Eminem said.
We can all, we can all fear, you know, and when you put it into the context of society, then you can get gobbled up by it. Picard was it was a lie. It was a show wrapped up in a lie. It was called Picard to drag people in, but it had nothing really to do with Picard. It was a generic, boring story, ill-conceived and ill-thought out with terrible characters, i.e. current Trek. And so I don't think modern day television is going to produce the kind of thought-provoking shows that we've had until people start to write for all, instead of themselves, or instead of a singular group or a specific group or a minority group. It has to be something that everybody can relate to, and that's why something like The Prisoner remains such a stable television show even today, and has been a cult classic.
Well, it's funny. 200 Watt Studio just sent in a super chat and said, "Explain the line from Discovery. We have outlawed time travel to prevent someone from the past from changing the future." Isn't that outlawing time itself?
It's called bollocks.
Yeah.
Because how are people in the 100,000 years in the future going to be able to stop people? Did you watch Enterprise?
Well, I mean, they pay this lip service to things. I mean, I'm supposed to get excited because they have the USS Nog 1,000 years in the future. The Voyager J. And one of the characters on Discovery talks about, oh, it's 10 generations. There was no Voyager, you know, back then, but back in the time of Discovery. But that's the problem that I have with this show, is that it's so willy-nilly. You know, and and we have so much great television. Like, I'll watch something like The Queen's Gambit, which is admittedly based on a book, but it's 7 episodes that really hold together, and its focus is on the journey of this one woman in a certain period of time, and it examines her journey from a number of different perspectives. Also a show that doesn't, the men in her life are not bad people. You know, they're different aspects of human dudes, but they all offer something. And I thought the portrayal of male characters, they had a book to work from, but was very uplifting. That show is, I thought it was a very smart, uplifting show, and that's how Star Trek used to be. And now I watch a show that's full of people that are borderline incompetent and shouldn't be where they're at.
Still not a white male character in power in the show anywhere.
Yeah.
Still, but it's inclusive. But that's its strength, is its inclusivity.
Yeah, we'll be inclusive until we can't save ourselves from a coming calamity because we'll be too worried about whether we're going to be inclusive. What we need is competent people that are really good at their jobs, that don't worry about things like PTSD when they're on starships. And if they do, that's why they have counselors on the ships.
And she's still working.
Yeah, I mean, it's like as soon as somebody can't do their job, you're relieved.
Yeah.
You know, you're replaced by somebody that can do your job. This is a quasi-military organization. I mean, these are people that are supposed to understand. They have had discipline driven into them. And this idea at the drop of a hat, however somebody feels, it's so ridiculous the way people talk to each other. There's no respect to the chain of command. Martino Sumoli goes on to say, less visual means you concentrate on content, like theater. More entertained by an intelligent monologue on a black backdrop than by lens flares. That's absolutely correct. You know,
you just look at how many great Picard speeches there were.
Oh, Tad, so good. Tad 586 says, "Evening, gents. A bit late to the party. Not as bad as last week, but not a fan of Do Not Forsake Me. These two didn't fit the rest of the show for me." Well, we were talking about that, Tad, and I think you're right. And obviously there was production issues they had to face with McGoohan having to leave to go make Ice Station Zebra. But I do think that there's some really interesting stuff in this show. And as we called it, it was an entertaining episode as opposed to an episode that does stray from the central thesis. Martino goes on to say, of course, Star Trek the Motion Picture was able to do both and therefore activate all parts of my brain. Martino, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Star Trek the Motion Picture is my favorite Star Trek movie. I don't think it's necessarily the best Star Trek movie, but it's certainly my favorite. And
it's great.
Yeah, and I think that even the director's cut's even better. And it has real character development. Spock understands the moment where Spock takes Kirk's hand and explains this simple feeling is beyond V'ger's comprehension. And Spock understands that here he's found the source of maybe the most pure logic in the universe, and it's not enough. You know, he realizes humanity has something of value. And Spock is irrevocably changed at the end of Star Trek the Motion Picture. I really wish that with The Prisoner, there was an episode after Fallout where he, for real, finally gets returned back to his flat. He gets to go back to London, and it would have ended where he doesn't necessarily know who he is or what he's supposed to do now, because he'd spent so long for fighting for his identity that the question then becomes, you've won your fight. Now what?
Now what?
What? Now that you have your identity back, you've triumphed in a battle that most people never have to fight, which is, who am I? Number 6 knows who he is. He's seen his identity attacked and stripped away from him from every direction, and he's triumphed. And once you've done that, now what are you going to do? How many people have gone through the crucible that number 6 has gone through and now knows who they are? And to have that kind of knowledge, what are you going to go do in the world now? And it would have been interesting to see what conclusions he drew and what actions he was going to take.
But that, without getting too much into the Fallout talk, you know, there's a lot of open end to the end. You know, you could view it in multiple different ways about what happens next.
Yeah. Stubble McShave says, by the way, some are very intolerant in demand for tolerance. Yes, they are.
Yes, that is very well expressed. We have people who, well, we call it virtue signaling, but
Right.
we have people who go under the guise of virtue, but they are more intolerant than the very people that they are attempting. We all know this. Yesterday, there was a tweet. There's a tweet from somebody within the comic book industry, and they showed this clip of the Joker and Red Skull, and the Joker like having a go at Red Skull and saying, "Even I'm still American, and I'm not Nazi." And this comic writer put, "See, even the Joker doesn't like Nazis." And I just thought to myself, I actually, and I say the word with its true intention, I don't know how retarded this person is. You know, I don't know how mentally deficient this person actually is for multiple reasons. Number one, for thinking that half America's Nazis, which in itself is just pathetic.
It's absurd.
And number two, cheering on not just a criminal, but cheering on the worst criminal in the DC universe, who has probably killed more people than the combination of all your fabricated Nazis have. And so in essence, you have become worse than a Nazi, or you're happy to be worse than a Nazi to go, "Hey, I'm owning you Nazis."
Yeah, it's a very strange. We live in a very strange time, and I think what's really unfortunate is we bandy about these terms without any real understanding about what they mean or what they really are, and it is unfortunate. So,
well, you call half your country that for 4 years. You're going to drill it into people's heads, and then you can't turn around and say, let's what was the word? Let's start healing or whatever it was.
Right.
You can't do that when you've been calling them these words for 4 years. It's impossible.
Well, I think that, you know, one of the things that I find distasteful about where we're at is I think both sides, you know, I always talk about, I would consider myself a classical liberal, left-leaning, but I don't, what I've seen the left sort of become, and the way, like we talk about virtue signaling and all of that, I'm more interested, and I've always been interested, the things that I've been interested in pop culture wise, like Star Trek and The Prisoner, are things that ask questions where they're the beginning of a conversation. And The Prisoner does not tell you what this new thing I keep saying. It doesn't tell you what to think. It just tells you, here's something that you should think about. And as opposed to tell you, this is how you're supposed to think this way. And I've always loved science fiction, fantasy, and horror as a genre because it's constantly posing questions to you. You know, as a consumer of this kind of media, these questions are like, can you imagine if Stanley Kubrick made 2001 and at the end of that movie, he just told you what it meant? You know, it's the whole point is to leave it open-ended and up for interpretation. And I think that's why it's so great. And maybe The Prisoner goes into the realm of ambiguity a little too far, but on the other hand, maybe in a way that's kind of the point, because really on a meta level, The Prisoner's asking you, if you like this show and you watch this show, who are you as an individual? What is it you want? What do you believe in? You as the viewer will not be stamped, debriefed, or numbered. And how are you going to stop from that happening to you? And I think one of the most relevant questions that we have in the modern day, when everybody is reduced to their data profile, we have literally been reduced to numbers and statistics. All of us have been the very things that number 6 talks about in the beginning of every episode has happened to all of us during the time of the internet and physical media. We've all become data points.
Filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, and numbered.
And we've all been, that's the
multiple
times on many different levels. And that's what I find so interesting about this particular show is it was once a cautionary tale that has absolutely come true. And now that it has come true, how do we retain our identities in this modern age when they've already been stripped from us?
Hail the New World Order.
Yeah.
Hail the New World Order.
But even that, like even a New World Order, what's that New Order going to be? What are you going to offer? Is it just going to be about profit? Is it going to be about like I keep going back to this book written by Yuval Harari, this book Sapiens that I read last year.
Yeah,
I talk about it's the 100,000-year history of mankind, and at the end of that question, at the end of the book, he poses the question: what is it that we as a species, meaning the entire human race, there is one race of people, the human race, and what do we as a species want? What do we want? Are we just going to spin our wheels and spend money and be consumers for the rest of our lives? Are we going to go, take yoga? I mean, what do we want? What are we going to do for the next 100,000 years?
Well, we should be looking out there.
I agree.
Is where we should be looking. That's where our focus should be.
Absolutely.
It should be out there. It should be travel. It should be, can we colonize? It should be exploration. It should be all of this.
And what's great about that is
we're too busy fucking around with our pronouns in our bios. So that's out the window.
I mean, I agree. And the funny thing is we look up at the night sky, and there is a purpose that is endless.
Yeah,
we will never reach the end of it. It is a purpose that will never, it is unwavering, and it is something that we can look up and go, we're supposed to push the advancement of human knowledge. And we are so mired, we're so navel-gazing and so myopic. And so, like you said, people are more concerned with how they're going to be. Look, I'll address anybody. I don't care how somebody wants to be addressed. I will address them that way because that's considerate and that's the polite thing to do. But well, no, in terms of on an individual level, if however you want to be, I'm happy to address you, but don't make it the law of the land. Don't push it.
Well, I would say to a limit because I think a lot of it's bollocks anyway. We've had these conversations.
Yeah. Well,
but I think, and if you, again, people are demanding respect. Respect, you don't demand respect. Respect is earned.
Yes.
And so you don't come barking at me with saying, I want to be this, like this. Who are you?
Well,
who are you?
Right. Exactly.
So yeah. I think there's a common respect to people who are truly struggling. And we know when I say truly struggling, the people who truly are having difficulty with their identities, shall we say? With that, I've got all the time and compassion in the world, and would do everything to make your just that little thing in your life that little bit better. But some 20-year-old tyke on fucking Twitter, no, they can eat my ass, to be honest with you, because that's just attention-seeking drivel.
No, I agree, but I mean, I think that we really do have to figure out what is it that we want. What is humanity? What's in store for us for the next 1,000 years? And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to at least start thinking along those lines. Like instead of thinking about, because it's hard for us to think beyond our lives.
We were at one point, and what happened?
I don't know, but we need to start thinking about that. And people are like, well, I'm not going to be here, so what does it matter? Well, it matters because it defines the time that you're here as well.
Yeah,
we want to start planning that we're going to be here in 1,000 years.
Yeah, we put a man on the moon in 1969.
The last time we went back was 1972.
that he wanted to be the first man on the moon. And a year later, who would know? But a year later, Neil Armstrong landed, was the first man on the moon. And now here we are, 51 years later? And I don't, how long has it been since we put a man on the moon?
Since 1972.
Or a woman.
Or a woman, a person. Yeah, we have not put a human being has not set foot on the moon since 1972. And to me, that is I mean,
crazy.
what we're doing now, what people like Elon Musk, it's taken private industry to now. I mean, this past week, 4 astronauts went up in a rocket, in a space taxi, they're calling it, that was privately created, not by a government, but somebody like Elon Musk who's put his money where his mouth is, and he's opening the frontier of space. Amazon's Jeff Bezos and his Blue Origin company is going to do the same thing. And when you start thinking about that, like we have a solar system to conquer, and that's going to take hundreds of years to do. But why not start now? Why not do that? We certainly have the place. We have the time. We have the place to go, the wherewithal, and the byproduct of all of that research. How many people will be inspired? What kind of technological advancements are we going to make with all of this? It will push the boundaries of knowledge further than they've ever gone, and we're not doing it. We're arguing on Twitter, like you said about pronouns.
Yeah,
I'm like,
so
really?
I'm shutting mine down at the end of the year.
Yeah.
I can put my time to much better things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I've said, right, that's it.
Well, I think that this show is like that. Like you and I decided to start a YouTube show that was about something specific where we can trade ideas. We're asking people to come into this forum. We're talking about something specific, and hopefully we've taken something that's 50 years old that people might not know and given it some more value by showcasing it and getting people to watch. And then they themselves might be inspired to go do something else or contemplate things they wouldn't have contemplated before. So that's why people say, well, why do you do YouTube? They always ask me, Rob, why are you doing YouTube? I'm like, well, the whole point is that I'm at least hoping that by sharing my own enthusiasms for something, that's sort of my way of changing the world a little bit. A little incrementally at a time. Hopefully, if you disagree with what I'm saying or whatever, at least it started people thinking about things. If people can either like me or hate me, but to elicit some kind of response where they're thinking about something, that's maybe sort of our job. That's our job as storytellers or our job as pundits, or to get people to start contemplating, well, maybe contemplating the next 1,000 years. Maybe if that's all that we do, that's not such a bad thing. And to buy Hot Toys figures.
And to buy loads
John is here, sends in a super chat and says, I watched the DS9 doc from Shout Factory where it was said that character development was primary on the show and plot points needed to serve character. That is absolutely true. You cannot have a great story. First, you have to have great characters and a great story. 200 watt
has neither.
Yes. And when the stories that they do are trying to tell, they're not exploring the actual stories that are interesting. You come back to the Federation, that could be 3 or 4 episodes worth of stuff. But the first thing they do is the Federation doesn't believe in a Federation starship coming back. Like, there's no record.
Sassy Lesbian said, I want snacks.
Yeah, just the 200 watt studio. Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah. 200 Watt Studio says, been reading 1984 again. We are all Winston. Yes, we are.
Oh, yeah.
We're all Winston Smith.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Sadly, we are.
Stubble McShave sends in a super chat and says, the far right want to control what you do in a society, and the far left want to control what you think in a society. There are 2 sides of the same coin. I don't disagree with that. But the problem is we're seeing the rise of both, and I wonder, why does anybody want to do either?
I don't think we're seeing the rise of both at all. I think the far right is mythical, not mythical as much as it doesn't exist. mythical in its rising. I don't think it is at all.
Well,
it goes back to what we've been saying. When you call half your country Nazis, where do you stop at a percentage of Nazis?
Right, exactly.
1, 37.8. It's just got so ridiculous now, and because that's now the go-to insult, the go-to branding, whatever you want. It's just insanity. It's absolutely insanity.
No, I
talk to the average American, denounce white supremacy. Who wouldn't do that? Use your brain. Oh, what happened to George Floyd was disgraceful. Yes, absolutely. Nobody's there going, yes, great. Nobody. You ask people on the right that they're being, no, that was disgusting. It was disgraceful what happened. But you got 4 years of this insanity, and now it's just mud. It's just mud because there's probably a tiny fraction that genuinely is tiny, minuscule.
Well, also,
you've just branded 160 odd million people there.
What bothers me about bandying about the Nazi term around is it really denigrates what happened, what the real Nazis, the National Socialist Party, did beginning in the 30s and then into the 40s during...
But it is happening. It's happening right now, and it's called the far left. They're doing exactly the same thing as Nazi Germany in the 30s.
Very much so.
Books, they're censoring shit, they're screaming people down, they're demanding compliance. Every single thing that happened in Nazi Germany in 1930 is happening again right now, and it's the far left that is doing it, not the far right. The far bloody left. And they're doing it under the guise, to go back to what we were saying before, of virtue. That's how it starts.
I agree. I mean, it's, I hear people throw around the term Marxist as well. I'm like, do you guys know what Marxism led to? 20th century?
They don't know shit. They don't know shit.
Please show me the mythical Marx. What mythical Marxist republic would you like to emulate?
Was it Margaret Thatcher said? She said Marxism is great until you run out of other people's money or something.
Yeah.
So there you go. Marxism works until you run out of other people's money. I think that's yeah. So yeah, it's just it's insanity right now, and so I don't personally believe there is a rise on both sides. I think there is a very distinct rise on the far left. And they are dictating, because that's where all the echo chambers are, and that's where all the power is right now, because they've infiltrated everything from television to mainstream media to politics. That's why you've got governors locking people in houses and swanning off to fucking parties right now. And it's one rule for thee, and it's one for me, and one for thee, and it's getting very insidious, and it's been very insidious for a while now. And
no, I mean, it has, but I think that this dichotomy, whatever's going on in the United States, is not working. And the idea that we've seen massive spikes in COVID because we can't get our act together. I mean, it's, the same thing. That's why I'm such an advocate, like you said, of the space program. Because the space program is all about scientific. It's about science on every single level. Every level of I would have thought having cell phones in our pockets, smartphones like iPhones would have done it. Like I would have thought everybody would have been like, it is amazing what our cell phones can do. They start out as being calculators, if that's what you want, all the way to being video phones where you can talk to people on the other side of the planet in real-time video. We're carrying these around in our pockets, and they should be representations of just how far we've come as a technological society because of how many different things they can do. The fact that our phones are connected to space ultimately themselves. I mean, through cell phone towers, and you can write stories on your cell phone. You can use it as a video phone. You can play video games. You can tweet. You can go on Facebook. It's amazing,
film,
and yet
you can edit. You can
shoot
upload,
movies. All in the same device that we carry. I would have thought that we living in a society where you are carrying around that kind of technology in your phone would mean that we would have the utmost respect for science, the scientific method, and all of that. And it seems we're getting further and further away from that all the time. And yet we're using these devices every day to talk about how we shouldn't be scientifically minded. And it's just, it's insane.
That's because technology has overtaken common sense.
Right.
Is what's happened. We got the technology. Unfortunately, we don't have the common sense.
I think what we
go with it right now.
In space, I've always said the universe is indifferent to your suffering, and I think one of the things when you go to space, you have to realize that it doesn't matter what you think or what you feel, but when you're in outer space, all that matters is to make sure that your science works, because otherwise you will be dead.
I think we might be dead long sooner than we think at this rate.
But anyway, we're at over 2.5 hours, man.
Yeah, we gotta wrap this up.
200 Watt Studio just sent in a super chat and says, "Remember in Schindler's List, the girl yelling goodbye Jews as Jews are rounded up? It reminds me of what the propaganda has done to the mobs on Twitter." I agree with you there. And
AOC wants her list.
Yes.
They're all, because lists have never ever been a problem in history whatsoever.
No, it's that's why I always say we really need to remember that everybody. Scottish Nerd says irony is anarchists using tech to organize. That is true. That's 100% true. I mean, it is irony. The anarchists that want to go build a new society, but they'll build it in the middle of a city that already has everything built for them: infrastructure, water, parkland. Yes. They don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Stick them out in the field, I say. Stick them out in the field.
Yeah, go into the wilderness and build your perfect civilization. Don't do it in the middle of our cities.
Can I have an axe or something? No.
At least somebody like the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh built his own country or his own camp in Oregon.
They demand to have their own land, their own reservation, and a coffee shop.
Yeah, right. And it has to be a good coffee shop.
Yeah, we're not talking about a Starbucks. We're not talking about that.
Well, listen, I guess that we will bring this. Why don't you tell everybody what homework is for next week, Az?
Homework for next week is Once Upon a Time, the penultimate episode of The Prisoner. Goodness gracious me, we're here already. The penultimate episode, Once Upon a Time. Number 6 and number 2, Duel to the Death.
Duel to the Death, and we're at the smashing two-parter, or not really a two-parter, but two episodes that take us to the end of the show. All right, then. I'm going to go do Robservations in a half an hour, and I will see you on your channel. We will be on your channel next week, sir.
Yes, my channel next week. And thank you once again, Rox. I love doing this.
It's great. I want to thank our moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden, Greg Smith, the Richard here, Joshua Levesque is here, Robert Pariso is here. Thank you for doing such a good job moderating. I love having a moderating staff. Purple Valkyrie is here. And Purple Valkyrie, she also does a lovely job. Talk about a girl whose voice I love. Purple Valkyrie is somebody that you can listen to her channel. She has her channel as well. So
I'll be on it on, I think, a week today.
Oh.
Is it a week today? I'll contact you about the date again. But yeah, I think I'm going to be on a week today.
I want to thank her for doing a great job, for being a part of the team, and watch her show. Also, let's see. Thank you for writing in. I want to thank Kevin for writing in a very thoughtful letter.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great letter to go through, Kevin.
Great letter to go through. And I also want to thank everybody supporting the channels, both of my channel and Heel versus Babyface, with tips and super chats and becoming members and all of those things. Thank you all very much. It helps us keep going because, this is work.
Yeah.
After all,
got to pay the lecky.
There's a lot, we have computer equipment, and you can't just turn on air to go online.
No, I got a brand new streaming capture device coming tomorrow. A PS5 coming tomorrow.
You're lucky.
Yeah, as one of the few that managed to pre-order one.
Yeah, but no, it's all good. And I want to thank you especially, Az, for doing another great show. And I love doing these streams. I can't believe we've done 15 of them.
I know.
15. That means 15 weeks. And we had 2 weeks off, so it's been 17 weeks or something.
We've done 16 because we did an opening. We did a general discussion.
That's right, we did. My God. And all during COVID. All during the...
Mr. Tickle Trunk, you were very conspicuous by your absence today.
He missed the whole thing.
Well, I haven't seen. I looked and I didn't see your name in the chat. And I was like, "How Mr. Tickle Trunk's okay?"
Yeah, that's the thing. When people disappear, like you don't see them in the chats, you wonder, like, "Oh, I hope they're okay."
Yeah,
and it's not something you can really say. Like you can't go because you don't want other people to freak out or anything. But when you don't see people, it's like, do they hate me now, or did I say something wrong, or are they okay?
Yeah, it's like penance time.
Well, listen, so this episode of 6 of 1 will end. Do not forsake me, oh my darling. And once again, thank you to Jason Spriggs for making these beautiful graphic overlays. I can't wait to see.
They are amazing.
I can't wait to see what he does for the next 2.
Fallout. I am desperate to see Fallout.
I know, right? What is he going to do? Because this one's pretty damn great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings, whoever you are, however you identify from across these 28 known galaxies, I always say every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I will say, be seeing you, as does Mr. Tickle Trunk.
No, he's just a white supremacist. That's the white supremacist.
No.